lecture series of the 2014-2015 academic year, also the 125th anniversary year for our university. Today we are glad to host U.S. Army veteran Corporal Volley, or VR, Dooley. Native of Lone Oak, Texas, Dooley grew up on a cotton farm and worked long hours in the fields to provide for his family, which included 9 other siblings. As soon as Pearl Harbor was attacked, however, VR received a draft notice in the mail ordering him to report to Camp Walters in Mineral Wells, Texas for basic training. During his service in the European theater, he often found himself in interesting situations and learned that no quiet moment is a safe moment. His actions, as you'll hear today, earned him a Silver Star, a Bronze Star, and a Presidential Unit Citation. Mr. Dooley is joined on stage by our moderator, Sarah Miller, a junior history and English double major and fellow intern in the project. Following the presentation, we will have a question and answer session. After the whole presentation up here is finished, just raise your hand if you have a question, and we'll try to make sure that all questions are answered. Again, thank you all for coming, and now we'll move it over to Sarah and Mr. Doc Dooley.
Okay, this is on. Perfect. Okay, so over the phone you said that you wanted to speak a little first. Do you still want to say something before I ask you some questions?
Okay, am I on?
Yep, yeah. You are on. So, do you want to say something before we start, or do you just want me to ask you questions right off the bat?
Would you like for me to say a few words myself?
It's whatever you want.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, let me say a few words like, it's good to be here with you tonight. I appreciate this. I appreciate the invitation. Actually, it's an honor to be asked to come with you tonight. So I thank you. Now, I'm shaking, but I'm not scared of anybody. I just shake. But you already know my name, and I appreciate you giving me my name as VR. My aunt named me Volley Ray Dooley, and I never did like volley. So that's one reason that can everybody hear me without the mic? Okay, I was talking it. My aunt Lucy from Lone Oak, Texas, she named me Volley Ray. I never did like volley, so anybody that called me anything, well, it was a nickname. So I've had more nicknames than anybody in the country. And I see we have a variety of people here tonight, and that's good, because I understand we're going to talk about some things that happened 50, 60, maybe 70 years ago. So I might need some help on that. However, my doctor, I said, well, I seem to be forgetful. And he said, that goes with old age. And I said, I qualify, don't I? I can remember things that happened when I was 12 years old, really better than I can remember what happened yesterday. Speaking of 12, you know, whenever we were 12 years old, the first thing the most that we were interested in was being 17 or being a teenager. So tonight, I'm not 12 and I'm not a teenager, but in the next month, on the 10th day of the next month, I'll be 94 years old, and I've enjoyed every bit of it. Wow. And would you like to ask me some questions now?
Yes, I would. Okay, I just want to start off before the war and ask you how the Great Depression affected you and your family, since there were so many of you.
Come again?
How did the Great Depression affect you and your family?
Depression? Mm-hmm. It was bad. Well, and I lived through the Depression. I was a kid most of that time, but you know, people had to work just as hard then as they did any time. My dad was a farmer, cotton farmer, and raised other things too. But he thought that honesty and a hard day's work was the thing to do. And so we did that. And I've done a lot of hard days' work. And I've worked pretty hard trying to get out of work too. But you don't get out of all of it, do you?
Did all of that hard work prepare you for basic training? All that hard work on the farm?
Did it what?
Prepare you for basic training?
Well, it's good for everybody to have hard work. I mean, do hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's health-wise too.
Yeah.
I know it's been a few days since I talked to a man in my church. We visited together a little, and he used to be a football coach. And he said, I think it'd be good for everybody to get to the opportunity to go to the Army and stay a hitch if they wanted to, you know. Mm-hmm. And some people never had to do anything they didn't want to, but in the Army you do.
So you were drafted into the Army. How did you have any other plans before you were drafted into the Army?
Oh yes, I had. There was 3 of us, and we kind of went in together at the same time, took our training together, and some people here know one of them, Lewis Swenson. We went in together, and a boy lived in Greenville, Texas, or he lived outside of Greenville just a ways. His name was Brown, and we were the 3 Stooges, you know. We stayed together all the time, and we were drafted at the same time. We took our training at the same time, and then that's good, I appreciate that. Now, if this, I've been shaking, but if this starts shaking, well, we'll do something else. Thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me now? And we went overseas, and one boy, Lewis, he was messed up with a mine, a foot mine, and he was blind the rest of his life. And the other boy was killed the first night in combat. And I survived, and I'm glad of that.
Yeah. Like you just said, once you got overseas, a lot happened in those first few days.
Yes, I took my training at Camp Walter's infantry base. It was at okay, thank you. If that's not a direct mic, I'll talk into it like that. Now I think we're better off now. I took my training, infantry basic training, and I was trained as a rifleman. Mm-hmm. But when I got overseas, it was about the 3rd night I was in combat, the BAR man got killed. Mm-hmm. And my captain knew my name, and he asked me if I would take it, and I did, and I carried it the rest of the time that until the end of the war. Mm-hmm. And it was a good weapon. In case there's someone who does not know what a BAR is, that stands for Browning Automatic Weapon. And it's been so long, I'm not sure, but I think I always put 21 clips, 21 slugs in a clip.
Wow.
And I carried a clip, I carried the clips with me in a bag. And they was heavy because the BAR was heavy too. I took the tripods off. Everybody, I'm sure, knows what tripods are, what they set on like that. But I didn't need that because I carried a sling arms.
Wow. So you went through a few of those BAR weapons.
I went through 3 BARs. Is that what? Yes, that's true. The first one burned out a firing pin, and there wasn't anyone in my squad that knew how to put one in. And the second BAR got a slug from artillery about the size of your hand, and it went through the stock and split it open, so I had to have another one.
That's crazy. So tell us a little bit about how you trained to take over bunkers when you got overseas.
How I what?
Trained to take over bunkers, to take over German bunkers.
Are you saying bunkers?
Yes.
Yes, we had a lot of bunkers that we took. In fact, the first night that I was in combat, the captain took about 25 of us in one of the bunkers that we had already captured, you know. And they'd painted the walls with some kind of luminous paint, and you could strike a match and hold it up, and by the time the match burned out, well, you could see then for a few minutes, you know. And we were going to take that bunker another bunker the next morning. And I remember well and good, my captain looked at me, and I thought, he hates me. He said, I want you for my scout. And the scout is the one that goes down first, you know. And but you know, I went down there, and when I got down there, there was waving a white flag, and there was, I believe, 5 Germans in there. They wanted to surrender, but they knew we were coming after them.
Yeah. What kind of relationship did you have with your captains and your fellow soldiers?
Well, it started off not too good, but we went and ended up best friends. And we stayed in contact and in touch with each other good until he died. He passed away a few years ago. And incidentally, my captain, he was just a captain there, but he went through West Point, and he was there the same time that General Eisenhower and General Patton was there. And he said General Patton used to outrank Eisenhower.
Wow. Wow. So in your interview, you talked about minefields.
Yes.
And just talk a little bit about that and how your training helped you.
That was a dreaded thing, a minefield, because you didn't know where they were. And I know the first night that we were fixing to jump off was in a long line, and I'll never forget, it was a turnip patch, and we were on the rows, and just a row of turnips, and we lined up about 10 feet from each other, and the sergeant said, everybody rest a minute, we're not going to move out for a little while. And while we were there resting, I wasn't resting, but I was, because it was pouring down rain, but I looked ahead of me, out there, and I got to seeing something that was like a cloth or a wide piece of paper. I knew it wasn't paper because it would have been rained out, and it went out through the field like that. And so I had learned what that was in my training. I listened, and I learned that had been a soldier had been going out through there with a mine detector or prodding for mines, and he laid that as a safe. And whenever they said, "Let's move out, men," I hit that, and I ran on it until I got almost into the woods, and then I looked, and there lay the man that was doing that. He had hit a mine, and it had blown him up. And I don't know how long he'd been there, maybe 2 or 3 days. But anyway, I went on into the woods then.
So he saved your life, and he was already...
Well, I guess I imagine so, because several of the men were killed. And one told me before we went out that night out of the bunker, he told me, he said, "Now, when you're running along by somebody and they get on a mine or artillery kills them," says, don't stop and help them, because if you do, you'll get shot, you know. So he was one of those that didn't make it that night.
Yeah. You talked about in your interview about taking over a river. You were crossing a river and there were Germans.
Oh, a river, yes, I made one river crossing, crossed the Saar River, and after we crossed it, that's where I got wet. We had a 7-mile-an-hour current going. The river was going 7 miles an hour, and it was cold, and we had icebergs, some of them big as a tub, and they were coming down, and when they'd hit a boat, well, they'd turn the boat. You could just paddle all you wanted to, but you'd turn and go with the iceberg if you didn't get loose from it. But there was 5 in my boat when we started to cross the river, but whenever we got to the bank, there was only 3 of us. And I looked out. There was machine gun fire going over us, so I looked out, and I thought I saw the ground. So I took my BAR and all my belongings and jumped out, and it was about this deep.
Oh.
And that's where I burned my clothes.
You should tell that story.
We went this was a little town. It had been a town that was blown all to pieces then. But we went in, and there was 3 of us, and one guy was named Casey. I remember he was Casey. His last name was Fry, Casey Fry. And he said, we've got to get that machine gun up there. He was a sergeant. He said, "We've got to get that machine gun." And I said, "Okay, let's go up." I saw a barn there. It was an old barn, and it was still standing. And so he said, "Let's go and get in that barn." I said, "Okay." So he took off first, and that machine gunner, he saw him going from the house to the barn, and he lit the ground up all around him, and I took off then too, and he fired at me. But the 3rd guy, I turned around to him and I said, "Don't come across." It was only a distance of about from here to the wall there. And I said, don't come, he'll get you. And he says, I don't want to stay here by myself. I said, we'll be back. I said, stay here. I said, don't come. And he said, yes, I am. And he started, and he didn't get but about 2 feet. And they got him all in the legs. And but he didn't die. I said, well, you're going to do all right. And Casey, he went down and went up a ditch. He was from up in Kentucky, in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I believe that's where they are, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, he went. He came back, and he told me. He said, "Now you see it. Nobody gets behind me," and says, "I'm going around and get behind that German." And he went around. I heard I heard his weapon go off, and he came back, and he got him all right. And he came back, and this boy was laying over there. He was kind of crying and, hurting and all. And I went over there before Casey got back, and I had I got his bayonet, and I cut his clothes that way, so I could see where he was shot, and he was just shot in the legs. So Casey came back, and when Casey walked up, Casey said, "Dooley, I got him all right." He added something else to it. I wouldn't tell you what he said. But he said, "How's our boy doing over there?" I said, "He's doing good." I said, he's nearly quit bleeding." And he said, "It's because I haven't got any blood left." And I felt sorry for him, and we had to go. And I told him, I said, "The medics will be here. Don't worry, the medics will be here." And so we went on, and I was wet, my clothes wet. And we went in one house, and the Germans had just left out. And they had a fire going. In fact, they had some fried eggs and meat on there. It was burned up by the time we got to them. And I said, "Casey," I said, "I'm freezing." He said, "Well, pull off your clothes, your pants, and warm them. You can dry them there by the stove." And so I had my pants up, holding them up that way to the fire, and it was hot, good and hot. And one of those Germans shot through the window, and I dropped them on the stove, and they called fire. And they burned out my knees. So the next day I saw the captain, and he said, "Dooley, I've never seen anything look like you before." He said, "I'm going to get you some clothes." So it wasn't but a little while until a Jeep came up there where we were and brought me some pants. I don't know where he got them, but I put them on.
So a lot of interesting stories as an infantryman.
Oh yeah.
Tell us, you have a Bronze Star and a Silver Star.
Yes.
Tell us how you got those awards.
Well, I'll tell you how I got the Silver Star about. But the Bronze Star, my whole squad got that. And incidentally, my squad was they were good men, and we stuck together. But I had a hard time staying with them because they had too much fun all the time, and they weren't serious enough. And we were in the woods, heavy woods, pine trees, and then a lot of underbrush. And they were talking loud and all, and it's dangerous that way. And I was BAR man, and I stayed several feet away from them, like from here to the other end of this room here, and they all went together, but I don't think that they all understood that one shell would kill them all.
Yeah.
So I stayed my distance away from them, and I looked up in the woods and I saw where the Germans had cut a bunch of wood, which was not an unusual thing, because the Germans didn't have any gas, they didn't have any coal, and the only way they had to keep warm, most of them, especially in the areas like that, was to cut wood.
Yeah.
And it was a stack of wood about 7 or 8 feet high, I guess. And it was a long stack of wood.
Mm-hmm.
So I went up there and investigated. And I walked up to the side of it. And then, you know what a rick of wood is, but they just kept stacking it up high. And I walked up to the side of it, and the logs was about that big around, all of them just alike, and about that long. And they were turned all the same way, and I just got to looking at that, and it looked so funny. And dumb me, I stopped and I looked, and one didn't look like a log, and I looked at it, and it was the muzzle of a cannon. And the Germans was inside there, and they had the tank, the German tanks hid with that wood.
Mm-hmm.
And so I carried my grenades on my belt, and they had worked to the back.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reaching to get one of them. And incidentally, before I thought about my grenades, I heard a guy talking in German, and then he was talking loud, and then he stopped, and they all laughed. So I figured he told them a joke, but I'd slipped up on them. And the squad was walking toward me about from here to the back of the building, back of this room. And whenever I reached back for that, just as I did, one of the guys said, "Hey, Dooley, don't shoot that plane. It's one of ours." A plane had been flying over, and he thought that was funny, because I knew it was one of ours before he did. And the plane was looking for a tank, because they'd been reported in that area, see.
Mm-hmm.
So he hollered loud, and when he did, that tank cranked up and hit that wood, and it went every way. I didn't have time to reach, and so they all were quite a distance away. Now my citation reads that they withdrew to new positions, but they were already in their new positions. But I don't blame them.
Yeah.
But I was too close to run, and I had to stay. So I just followed him, stayed behind him, and kept peppering him with that BAR. And I guess he decided that he didn't want any more of that. So he turned and went down the side of the ditch, and there was another tank in the area, but he never did come up there. So it was, and incidentally, my squad is the one that told my captain what happened, and they are responsible for me having a Silver Star. In fact, they they would have, if they had been with me, they'd nearly all been killed.
That BAR came in handy.
Beg your pardon?
The BAR came in handy. You used it to help fight off the tank.
Well, yeah, it's, I didn't know I was up for a Silver Star until my captain told me one day. He said, Dooley, I want you to come with me. We're gonna go back to headquarters. And I went back with him, and General Harry J. Malone is the one that pinned it on me. But
Yeah.
that's the way I got my Silver Star. It was the fact that my squad told my captain how it happened, and they were good soldiers, all of them.
Yeah.
But they were not with me, and it's good that they weren't.
Yeah. So your unit captured a lot of Germans.
Yes, our battalion, we captured more Germans and took more pillboxes than any other in the Third Army.
Yeah. Did you have any conversations with any of the German soldiers?
No,
No.
I was kind of the quiet one. When we'd get a lot of prisoners, they're coming in to surrender. Well, I always stood back at one side because I had the BAR. And somebody else, we call it frisked them down, see if they didn't have a weapon with them. But they generally wanted to surrender, or they wouldn't be coming in like that.
Did that happen more often as the war went on?
That's right. Toward the end of the war, toward the last few days, we used to capture a whole company at a time. And a lot of them, when we'd get there, the tanks and the other boys rode on the tanks, but I didn't. I just walked all the time. I guess that's why my knees are worn out now.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to get on a tank because I know what happens whenever a shell hits a tank.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's about time to open it up for audience questions. So, anybody in the audience have a question for Mr. Dooley?
All right, there's one.
What was your captain's name?
What'd she say?
What was your captain's name?
Oh, his name was Captain Bill Warren. I wondered one day about, him. I wonder if you knew, did you go to school, with Eisenhower and Patton? And I didn't ask him that, but we stood, after the war, we stood inspection, and our company was here, and my captain was standing out there, and the senior officers came along, and whenever Patton got in front of my captain, he said, "Hi, Bill." So I knew him. And I also saw General Patton before he got to us. One officer down there, I think he was a general, all right, and he was smoking a cigar. And when they called attention, before they called attention, he ran out there and laid that cigar down by a bush. And Patton was close enough, he saw him, and when Patton got there, he walked over there and stepped on it and then went back. Of course.
Put out the cigar. Anybody else? Yes.
How heavy was the BAR?
How heavy was the BAR?
Well, I don't remember, but I'd say more than likely it was around 25 pounds. It would be more than that with the tripods, but I always took them off because I carried it sling arms. It was heavy.
Where were you when the war ended?
Let me see, where was I?
In Poland, maybe?
Oh, the main force of the Third Army was in Czechoslovakia, but that's where the tanks were and all. But we were still, we were in a little town called Elsenfeld, Germany, and we were taking prisoners then, hundreds of them. And they would even stack the rifles for us, their rifles, and when we came in, well, then they'd all be, and they would, they had these bunkers. There was like going in a hotel, some of their bunkers, and they would be dressed, shaved, clean, and clean clothes on, and we looked like a bunch of, I don't know what. You know, it was all muddy and all.
Yeah. Anybody else?
What did you do after the war?
What did I do?
After the war?
You mean while we were still over there?
No,
When you came home in discharge.
We had to stay over there, Haley, for some time because there was, I understand there was 7 million men afar, and they couldn't all come home at the same time. And I think I stayed there about 3 months, 2 months, and nearly 3. And you just had to do things to entertain yourself, you know. Now we did go, they'd have us going through these towns and going and seeing if there was a place of business where someone was. We'd go in and talk to them and find out if there's, you know, fixing to try to open up or something like that. In other words, we found out what they were doing there first. And I know they gave my friend and I, his name was Coleman, and we were supposed to go, we had a list of streets that was going to go down, and we was going to talk to the people. So he says, okay, Dooley, here we go. He said, and we got down, we walked to he said, Dooley, you can speak German better than me. And I said, I can't speak German. He said, yeah, you can speak German. And he says, I've heard you talk to him. And so we saw this big smokestack, and we saw the office there, and we looked, and there was someone in there. So we went up in the office, and this lady, she was well dressed, and she was a very nice looking lady. And so we knocked on the door, and she came open the door, and I couldn't say but just a few words, but I said something to her, and she said, come in, you know, in German. We got in there, and I was really trying to show her how I could talk German. I'd say a word, you know, and she said, she kind of laughed, and she says, why don't we just speak English? I said, that's good. I looked at Coleman, I said, now it's your time to talk. Oh,
what was the food like? And were you able to
I can't
write
hear
letters
that far
home?
off.
What was the food like?
What the food like? Well, of course, we had good food whenever we ate at our eating places. But are you speaking of during the war?
Yes.
Well, what we could get. Now, occasionally we'd take a little town, you know, and there'd be no resistance, and they'd say, we're going to stay here, we're going to spend the night here, or we're going to stay here 4 or 5 hours. And they'd call in, a truck would come in and bring us all food and hot coffee and so forth. We hadn't had any for the longest. But they'd bring us, we had K rations.
Were you able to write letters home
Oh,
to your
yes.
family? Were they able to send them to you?
What do you say?
Were they able to send them to you? Send letters
Oh,
to you?
yeah. It took a long time to get there. And ours would take a long time to get here then, too.
Did you have any siblings in the war? Any of your brothers or sisters?
I had a brother. He was in the war in the Army before I was, and he trained in, I was going to say where, but I've forgotten. But he went overseas. He was in the invasion of North Africa,
Okay.
and that was before the D-Day, you know, whenever they invaded. Incidentally, I missed the D-Day. You know, I got into the Army later, but I hear, and I was reading a lot of things after the war. That's all we had to do is sit and read or something, eat if we had anything to eat. But anyway, this guy that was with me, he said, I want you to read this here, Dooley. It's about the invasion. And you know, that was really something. And some of you may have been to France and got to see and got to see all those crosses and barrels there. And folks, those are the unknown heroes. Many of them did great things. I know we had one boy one time, we woke up, didn't wake up, it got daylight, and there was a German tank sitting down there, and this boy, he had a bazooka. And he took this bazooka and he crawled all the way down there. And whenever he got down there, he fired it, and it was a dud. It hit the side of the tank and just bounced off. And so that was the end of that boy. That was sad.
Yeah. Any?
I know I was reading one time about, after the war, I was reading about the invasion. And whenever they were fixing to go across the channel, well, that night, the beach there in Britain or in England was solid with soldiers waiting to get on those boats to go across. And they were big landing crafts. And Eisenhower and some of his senior officers decided to go out amongst the men there, and there was it was for morale's sake, I would assume. But Eisenhower was working his way through there, and it was pretty crowded, and he pushed one guy over kindly, and he says, "Hey, watch who you're pushing." And that guy says, well, he said to Eisenhower, said, "Hey, watch who you're pushing." Of course, it was dark, and he couldn't see. And Eisenhower said, "Do you know who pushed you?" He says, "No." He said, "General Eisenhower." And that boy, that soldier said, "Do you know who you pushed?" And he said, "No." He said, "That's good." That was in our Army paper one time. I read it. I've never forgotten that.
We just want to thank you so much for your time today interviewing with us, and we have a gift for you. We have a plaque thanking you for your service and your time with us, and a patch
Gotta come around.
that you can sew on to
Well, it's a pleasure.
whatever.
Yes,
Oh, that's nice.
and here's the patch.
Yeah,
I
the patches
thank
are
you.
new.
I thank you very much.
No problem.
You wanna turn it around?
Yeah, let's see if we get a picture here.
Sarah, you wanna go stand on the other side and we're
Yeah, I do.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
Well, don't block your face here.
That's okay.
We're trying to get you. We're trying to get you in the
you-
picture here with
oh,
us.
you're taking a picture. There he goes. You better get ready.
And then one over here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. We
I thank all
appreciate
of
it.
you.
Yes.
Yeah, do you want me to hold this while?
Let's give him
I'll
a round
set
of
it-
applause.